Hello there, my name is Thomas O'Regan. I'm a professional property investor. Now, I wanted to talk to you guys about what I wanted to talk to you guys about today was something that is critical to understand, in my opinion, when it comes to being a property investor. And that is one of the large fundamental pillars that affects the property market and your potential to make profit within the property market. What is it? It's understanding property market cycles. Now, I track property market cycles, and it is one of the tools that I like to understand, or one of the metrics that I like to understand to make a choice whether I am or am not going to invest somewhere. And I guess the difference in understanding this is the difference between you buying a property that doubles in 2 years and you buying a property that takes 10 years to double in price. Obviously, if you can continuously find properties that are doubling every 2 years because you're able to understand how property market cycles work, then if you continually invest, you are obviously going to far outperform someone that simply invests in properties, not taking any consideration of the market cycle and has to wait 10 years for the properties to double. Now, here's the reality. Investing is obviously a risk, and you or I can never really know 100% what is going to happen in the future. No one can. You can just use indicators to get a rough idea of what potentially could happen. To a high degree, you can get an understanding of what is going to happen. It's just like reading the weather. Sometimes they say it's going to rain, it doesn't rain. Sometimes they say 70% chance of rain, it still doesn't rain. Most of the time when they say there's 100% chance of rain, it is very likely that it's going to rain. It's much like understanding property market cycles, okay? So basically, here are some things that I like to take note of when I'm looking at property market cycles. So this is super important. When I'm looking at property market cycles, one of the things that I like to use to identify if a property market is potentially at the bottom is I like to use comparables. I like to compare properties interstate, like for like, to see where there is value. For example, if I'm looking at 1-bedroom apartments or 2-bedroom apartments or 3-bedroom house on 500 square meter lots, I like to compare them interstate. And what I mean by apples to apples, if you're looking at a 1-bedroom apartment that's 40 square meters in an affluent blue chip area in Melbourne, a comparable interstate would be to look at a similar area, a blue chip affluent area, a 40 square meter property in a small boutique block, if that is what you are looking at in the other state, to compare it against. Okay. Once you do this a few times, or once you get used to doing this, you might find that, in Perth, for example, the apartments, the 1-bedroom apartments are 180,000. You might find in Sydney that the 1-bedroom apartments, and these are all similar areas but different states, ones in Sydney, the 1-bedroom apartments, let's call it 700,000. You might find that in Melbourne, the apartments are 300,000. You might find in Brisbane that the apartments are 550,000. These are all comparables interstate, similar types of areas. Now, what have we actually seen here? We've seen that just from this random example that I've used, we've seen that the apartments in Perth are very undervalued. Now, that makes me dive into the market and go, now I want to actually take a look at what's going on in this market cycle. And you might discover that since 2014, the property markets were actually a lot higher in Perth for these same products. The properties in Perth in 2014 for these 1-bedroom apartments were 550,000. So straight away, you can see that the property market has had a crash in its market cycle. And what you now want to overlay is what is the value, what is the replacement cost, what is the intrinsic value of the land for this property, okay? And you might find that the replacement cost is actually higher than the current value of the property. Now, as we've said, the property peaked out in 2014, so you don't actually know when the property is going to go up again. You can never time the exact bottom of the market, but there's a very high likelihood that if the property in 2014 was 550 and now it's 180,000, you're somewhere near the bottom of the market. Now you just need to overlay what's the replacement cost, because that's another metric you should take note of when you're investing in properties to know if you're buying property that has intrinsic value. Now, I could keep going on about this, but I won't, because this video is getting pretty long now. But hopefully, if you like me to go more in detail about property market cycles, just hit me up in the comments and I'll definitely do that. See you guys next time. Bye.